By the time my wedding video reached strangers online, most of them saw only 10 seconds of my life. They saw me walking alone, an empty front row beside me, and Callum waiting at the altar with tears in his eyes. What they did not see was the afternoon my mother decided he was not worth a chair at all. My name is Marin Whitlock. I brought the wedding invitation to my mother's townhouse in Lincoln Park because I still believed she might surprise me. Not with warmth, exactly. Vivian Whitlock was not a warm woman, but I thought she might at least behave like a mother when she saw my name printed beside Callum Reyes's. Callum came with me after work. His shift had run late, so he was still wearing his Navy security uniform. He stood beside me quietly while my mother took the invitation from my hand. She read the first line, then looked at Callum's uniform. "You're marrying a security guard." The way she said it made my face go hot. It was not a question. It was a verdict. Callum did not answer. I felt him shift slightly, but he stayed calm. I stepped closer to him. "Yes." I said, "I am marrying Callum, not his job title." My mother gave me a look I had known since childhood, the one that meant I was disappointing her in public even though we were alone in her living room. "You have a graduate degree," she said. "You work with people who have futures. Your father and I gave you choices, and I made one." I told her. Her mouth tightened. "Then don't expect everyone to clap for it." I remember thinking that one sentence changed the temperature of the room. Callum reached for my hand as we left. He did not defend himself, but I already knew the kind of man my mother had refused to see. On the drive home, Callum kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting near mine, close enough that I knew he was trying to steady me without making a performance of it. He didn't say anything about my mother until we reached our apartment, and even then, he only hung his uniform jacket over the chair and asked if I was okay. I wanted to say yes, but I wasn't. Callum worked as a security supervisor in a downtown office tower near the Chicago River. To my mother, that meant he checked badges. To everyone in that building, it meant something different. He knew the cleaning staff by name. He noticed when a receptionist came in with swollen eyes. He remembered which delivery drivers had bad knees and which executives treated people badly when they thought no one important was watching. He had stayed 6 hours after his shift when an older tenant collapsed in the lobby, waiting with him until his daughter arrived. He trained new guards patiently, even the ones who made mistakes. He organized safety drills people complained about until the day those drills helped during a real evacuation. He never told those stories to impress me. I usually heard them from someone else. That night, he finally said, "I can handle your mother judging me. I don't want you losing your family because of me." I looked at him and felt the cost of the choice in a way I hadn't before. "You're not the reason I'm losing anything," I said. "You're just the reason I'm seeing it clearly." It is strange how someone can be respected by strangers and still be dismissed at your own dinner table. My mother had looked at Callum and seen a uniform, but I had already seen what he did when no one was watching. For the next week, I tried to stay busy with the parts of wedding planning that still felt normal. Callum and I sat at our kitchen table with envelopes spread between us, checking addresses and meal cards, laughing quietly when we found old family nicknames in my contact list. We mailed 68 invitations to relatives and family friends in Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Missouri. And for a little while, I let myself believe the worst had already happened in my mother's living room. Then the replies didn't come. At first, there were ordinary excuses. My Aunt Lenore said she and her husband had already planned a trip. A cousin in Madison wrote that one of the kids had a tournament. Another relative said the timing was difficult, but sent love. I accepted those answers because people have lives, and I didn't want to turn every silence into an injury. But after 2 weeks, the pattern became hard to ignore. The people closest to my mother answered last. If they answered at all, several used the same phrase, almost word for word, about not wanting to encourage a mistake. I started calling them myself. Most were polite until I asked if my mother had spoken to them. Then their voices changed. One cousin said, "Martin, I don't want to get in the middle of this," which told me she was already there. An uncle told me, "Your mother is only worried about you," as if worry explained an empty chair. I didn't cry over every missing RSVP. I made a list, because lists help me stay steady. Names, dates, excuses, repeated wording. By the time I finished, the page looked less like wedding planning and more like evidence. I had always known my mother could influence people, but I hadn't understood how quietly she could do it. That night, I sat beside Callum with the list between us, and neither of us had to say what we both already knew. Tessa called me the following afternoon while I was reviewing the seating chart for the third time. She was my cousin on my mother's side, 2 years younger than me, and usually careful in the way people are when they've grown up around someone like Vivian Whitlock. At first, she asked about flowers and the venue, but her voice sounded too thin to be casual. I waited until she ran out of small talk. "Maren," she said finally, "I need to tell you something, but I don't want you to hate me." I set down my pen. She told me my mother had been calling relatives for weeks. Not once or twice, but steadily, making it sound as if attending my wedding would be the same as approving a mistake. Then Tessa admitted there was a family group chat I wasn't in. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. The screenshot was simple and clear. My mother had written that the family needed to stand together, that I was lowering myself, and that if everyone stayed away, I might come to my senses before it was too late. She called it an intervention, as if my wedding were an illness. I read it once, then again, looking for a softer meaning that wasn't there. Tessa said, "I should have told you sooner." "Yes," I said, "because pretending otherwise would have protected the wrong person." "But you told me now." I saved the screenshot, then emailed it to myself. I don't know why that felt necessary, except that proof can disappear when people get scared. After the call ended, I sat with the phone in my hand and felt something settle inside me. Proof doesn't always make pain easier. Sometimes it only removes the last excuse you were using to protect someone. I folded the seating chart, put the screenshot in my purse, and decided to go see my mother before she could pretend she hadn't done exactly what I now knew she had. I went to my mother's house the next morning with the screenshot printed and folded inside my purse. I don't know why I printed it when it was already on my phone, but I wanted something solid to place in front of her. She was in the kitchen when I arrived, drinking coffee beside the window. When I laid the paper on the table, she looked at it once and didn't even pretend to be surprised. "So it's true," I said. She lifted her cup slowly. I did what a mother should do when her daughter refuses to think clearly. There was no shame in her voice. That hurt more than a denial would have. "You told them not to come to my wedding. I told them not to encourage you." She said, "Callum may be kind, but kindness doesn't build a future. You are confusing decency with stability." I stood there and realized she had reduced him again. Not because she didn't understand me, but because understanding me would require her to admit she was wrong. "If I walk into that venue alone," I said, "it will be because you chose pride over me." Her expression hardened. "Then be ready to walk alone." I reached into my purse and took out the family brooch she had insisted I wear on my dress. She had called it tradition. Now it felt like a leash. I placed it beside the screenshot. "The wedding is happening." I said, "But this doesn't belong on me anymore." There are moments when you don't feel brave. You only know you can't keep standing in the same place. I left before she could answer, and for the first time, I wasn't waiting for her to change her mind. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up before my alarm and lay still for a few minutes, listening to Callum moving quietly in the other room. He had stayed at his brother's apartment the night before, but he had sent a message just after sunrise. "I'll be there waiting. Take your time." That was all. No pressure. No speech. Just the kind of steadiness he had always given me. The venue was a small lakefront garden in Chicago, simple and bright, with white chairs arranged in careful rows and programs stacked neatly on a side table. I noticed those practical things first because they were easier to look at than the front row. The name cards were there: mother, father, brother, grandmother, Aunt Lenore. Every chair was empty. No one had changed their mind at the last minute. No one had slipped in quietly, embarrassed, but present. My mother had said I should be ready to walk alone, and the room had proved she meant it. My bridesmaid, Nora, stood beside me near the back of the aisle. She didn't try to tell me it didn't matter, because that would have been a lie. Instead, she touched my elbow and said, "You don't have to pretend this doesn't hurt. I know." I said, "I'm going anyway." When the music began, I felt the first few steps before I really understood I was moving. There was no father beside me, no mother adjusting my veil, no brother looking uncomfortable in a suit. I felt each absence separately, like my mind was checking the empty places one by one. Then I saw Callum. He stood at the altar with his hands folded in front of him, looking at me as if there were no empty seats in the world. His eyes were wet, but he didn't look ashamed. He looked proud. That mattered more than I expected. I walked slowly. I didn't rush, and I didn't stop. Near the back, I noticed one of Callum's co-workers lift her phone. I thought she was recording the ceremony for someone who couldn't come, so I paid no attention to it. I had thought being alone would make me feel small, but walking anyway changed something in me. By the time I reached Callum, I wasn't thinking about who had stayed away. I was thinking about the man who had stayed. The next morning, I turned my phone back on in the hotel room while Callum was in the shower. I had kept it off through the reception and overnight because I didn't want to see more excuses from relatives who had already made their choice. I expected a few missed calls, maybe messages from vendors or friends sending photos. Instead, the screen froze. Notifications kept stacking faster than I could read them. My first thought was that something had gone wrong with a payment, or that someone in the family had created another problem I would have to manage before breakfast. Then I saw the video. It was only 10 seconds long. It showed me standing at the back of the aisle, then walking forward alone. The camera moved just enough to catch the empty front row before turning toward Callum. He was watching me with tears in his eyes, and there was no embarrassment on his face. The caption underneath read, "Her family boycotted the wedding because her groom is just a security guard. But her groom is..." I sat on the edge of the bed and felt my stomach drop. For a moment, I didn't feel defended. I felt exposed. That had been my wedding, my hurt, my empty chairs. I had not chosen to place that pain in front of strangers. Callum came out and saw my face before he saw the phone. What happened, I handed it to him. He watched silently, then looked at the comments. People were asking who had done this, why no one had come, whether the story was true. Then Tessa commented. She posted the screenshot from the family group chat, the one where my mother had called the boycott an intervention and told everyone not to encourage my mistake. There was no careful family language left to hide behind. My mother's words were now sitting under the video for everyone to read. I had spent weeks feeling ashamed of the empty chairs, and suddenly I realized they didn't belong to my shame at all. The story had moved out of my mother's control, and for the first time, her version was not the only one people could see. The first stories appeared in the comments before I understood how far the video had spread. At first, there were strangers saying they were sorry for me. and I scrolled past most of those because sympathy felt too sharp that morning. Then the comments changed. A man named Harold Givens wrote that Callum had stayed with him in the lobby after he collapsed from chest pain, long after his shift had ended, until Harold's daughter arrived from Oak Park. A younger guard from Callum's building said Callum had helped him study for a supervisor exam after work for 3 weeks. A woman named Elise said Callum walked her to her car every evening for 2 weeks after her ex started waiting outside the office. None of it sounded dramatic. That was what made it feel real. These were small, specific moments from people who remembered exactly what Callum had done when nobody was recording. By noon, 2 Chicago community pages had shared the clip. By evening, Callum's employer posted a short statement recognizing his years of leadership, emergency preparedness work, and service to tenants. Callum read it once, then put the phone face down on the table. "I never did any of that to be remembered." He said, "I know." I told him, "But you deserve to be respected." He looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed, and that made my mother's judgment feel even smaller. She had treated his uniform like proof that he lacked worth, while people who had actually needed him were using their own names to say otherwise. My mother had measured him by a uniform, while other people remembered what he did when no one important was watching. By the next morning, her friends were calling her, not me. Some relatives sent short messages filled with regret. The judgment she had tried to place on Callum had started finding its way back to her. 3 days after the video spread, my mother came to our apartment without calling first. I saw her through the peephole, standing in the hallway with her purse held tightly in both hands. And I knew before opening the door that she had not come because her heart had suddenly softened. Callum was in the kitchen when I let her in. He looked at her, nodded once, and said, "Good morning." "Vivian." His calmness made her discomfort more visible. She sat at our small dining table but kept her coat on, as if she did not plan to stay long enough for this to become real. Her face looked tired, though her voice still carried the careful control I had grown up hearing. "People are misunderstanding what happened," she said. "The internet turns private matters into entertainment." I waited. She looked toward Callum, then back at me. "You could post something. Just say it was complicated. Say families disagree sometimes." That was when I understood. She had not come to ask what the wedding felt like without her. She had come to repair what people thought of her. Then she took a check from her purse and placed it on the table. "A delayed wedding gift," she said. I looked at the check, then slid it back across the table. "You didn't forget to attend my wedding," I said. "You worked to make sure I had no family beside me when I walked down that aisle." Her mouth opened, but I kept going because stopping would have made room for another excuse. "If you want any place in my life, you will apologize to Callum directly. You will call every person you misled, and you will publicly correct the story you created." Callum did not interrupt. He did not protect her from the silence, and he did not ask me to soften it. That mattered more than I can explain. For the first time, I understood that keeping peace had often meant giving her control. My mother picked up the check and left with exactly what she had brought her pride, and no answer she could use. Several months passed before anything felt even close to settled. The first calls came from relatives who sounded embarrassed before they sounded sorry. Aunt Lenore admitted she had believed my mother's version because it was easier than asking me directly. One cousin said she had been afraid of being left out of family gatherings if she came to the wedding. A few people apologized clearly. Others tried to explain themselves for so long that the apology disappeared inside the explanation. I listened, but I didn't rush to make anyone feel better. My mother faced consequences, though they were not loud or dramatic. People in her social circle became polite in that careful way that means distance has already been decided. A charity committee she used to help organize quietly moved forward without her. Relatives confronted her after Tessa's screenshot spread through the family. And the respect my mother had tried so hard to protect became harder for her to claim. Eventually, she posted a public apology. It was not perfect, but it was direct. She admitted she had judged Callum unfairly, pressured relatives not to attend, and hurt me on my wedding day. I read it twice, then set my phone down. Callum asked, "Are you okay?" "I don't know yet," I said. But at least she finally said what happened. That was all I could give it at the time. I allowed limited contact after that, but only when she spoke to both of us with respect. I stopped treating access to my life as something she automatically deserved. Callum was later promoted to Regional Security Operations Manager. It wasn't because of the video alone. His record had already been building toward it for years. The attention only made people notice what had been true all along. On our first anniversary, we had a small dinner with the people who had come to the wedding, and the few relatives who had done the work to return honestly. There were no reserved seats this time, no empty row waiting to hurt me. Every chair was filled by someone who had chosen to be there. I still think about my mother. I still feel the loss of what she chose not to be that day. But I also know now that love without respect can become another kind of control. Some things were not repaired, but they were finally clear. And if anyone listening has ever been made to feel ashamed for choosing someone decent over someone impressive, I hope you remember this. The people who truly belong in your life won't need to humiliate you before they support you. Share your thoughts below, because sometimes hearing another person's story helps someone else name what they have been living through.